We are rolling.
We are almost rolling. We are rolling.
Yeah.
Cut.
Am I supposed to say something?
Yeah.
But actually, you might want to redo that because I accidentally zoomed in on your face.
Children, time to go to bed.
But we still want to play.
How about I read you a bedtime story? This book is about apartheid.
Mommy, what's the apartheid?
Yo, how do you not know what the apartheid is?
They despise colored people in South Africa.
Racist.
Mommy, where's father?
So basically, from 1948 to 1990, the National Party of South Africa began apartheid, a time of segregation and where native Africans and other colored people were oppressed and somewhat treated like slaves. So basically, you can see why the black people of South Africa began their own movement to end it. To explain this more deeply, laws were created by the National Party to segregate the colored and the white population from each other. Like America, these two different areas were not equal, and although things were pretty bad for black people as a whole, other laws like past laws were used to further control the lives of the Africans, as these laws required them to carry passports and identity documents in order to travel and to live in certain places. This has its roots from when the Europeans colonized most of Africa. As the Europeans were mostly white, they thought they were different and the Africans didn't know better than the white. The white took advantage of that. The black people didn't know if they were ripped off and just went with it. After many years of them not knowing what was happening, they finally noticed that they were ripped off and discriminated and took action.
Mommy, can I have a slave for Christmas? Child one, don't you know it's illegal to own slaves now?
Oh no! Child 4 is doing again.
Oh crap.
The NAC's aim was to fight for the rights and freedoms of black South Africans and to eliminate the apartheid. Their intentions have always been non-violent. They tried to keep the boycotts and protests as peaceful as possible. However, the Sharpeville massacre changed everything. In 1960, 69 Africans were killed and other hundreds were injured by the police during a peaceful protest. On April 8 in the same year, the NAC was banned. However, they were unstoppable. They formed the Spear of a Nation, an armed wing that carried 200 acts of sabotage. Nelson Mandela and other NAC leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964. In February 1990, the NAC reached a high point in their history. Despite the government's bannings and murders, they were forced to unban the NAC. They won the elections with a vast majority. 62.6% of 22 million votes were favorable for the NAC. On the 10th of May 1994, Nelson Mandela was elected as President of South Africa.
I'm so confused.
Okay.
I'm so
I'm sorry.
I'm so confused. Who are the people she was talking about? Nelson who?
Don't you know who this guy is?
Oh yeah, that's Morgan Freeman.
Also known for being the father of South Africa, Nelson Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist and the first colored president of South Africa who created a huge impact in the history of South Africa as he helped brought democracy to the nation. Since apartheid's aim was to segregate races from each other, he fought for those who were discriminated by the system of racial segregation.
Was he... Whoa. What was he like in his early age?
He was enrolled in a Methodist school and was sent to the center of the Taboo monarchy to be raised by the king's regent, where he was exposed in powerful black leadership which influenced him throughout his life. He grew up learning about African history, including the injustice colored people had to deal with whilst living in South Africa.
Whoa. Was he the only one?
No, there was also Desmond. No, there was also Desmond Tutu, an Anglican? No, there was also Desmond Tutu, an Anglican cleric, theologian who is also a famous human rights activist in South Africa. He was born... He has won the 1984 Nobel Peace Prize for his hard work in trying to end the apartheid, which then gained attention and recognition internationally. From the years 1985 to 1986, he was the Bishop of Johannesburg, being the first colored person to be in the position. Evil and unchristian, as Tutu describes the apartheid system, he aimed for a democratic society, abolishing racial discrimination and providing equality amongst all races. Mainly, he was influenced by the church with several white clergymen. And lastly, we have Walter Max Ulyate, who is a South African political activist and was a political mentor for Nelson Mandela. He was one of the leaders and activists during anti-apartheid, and he was also the co-founder of the ANC. Overall, these leaders wanted equality amongst everyone from different races, with allowing colored people basic human rights such as education, freedom of movement, and rights to self-determination. They wanted to put an end to segregation so that everyone is able to live freely and equally.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
Hey, shut up! I know that like the apartheid was between the white and black of South Africa, but does anybody know what problems they faced, how they overcame them?
Hey, I know that. South Africa was a bit different than the United States. Hey, I know that. So basically, South Africa was a little different than the United States when it came to ending racial segregation. While the United States had around 10 to 20 years to deal with segregation, South Africa worked over the course of around 40 years. And unlike America, which had key figures like MLK and so on, South Africa kind of had that, but at the same time didn't. Through those years, they worked through the means of riots, boycotts, and protests.
Yo, was that it?
Nah, fam. These protests got more intense as the Nationalist Party, the ruling party for those 80 years or 40 years, banned all legal and non-violent means of protest by black people in 1948. This caused the ANC and the Pan-Africanist Congress, or the PAC, to adopt a more aggressive approach. This led to continued civil disobedience and eventually the Defiance Campaign of 1952. Mass rallies were held in major cities and rural areas, and on the 28th of June 1952, the campaign was launched and groups of volunteers defied apartheid laws.
Oh frick, cool.
But that's not it actually. Although these offenses were minor, the government got really concerned and reacted by imprisoning ANC leaders in 1956. And although the campaign didn't completely deal with apartheid laws, it did catch UN attention and gain international support. Other events like it include the Sharpeville Massacre, where around 250 black civilians were injured or killed. Overall, issues such as segregation in public places and past laws were eventually overcome through these actions such as riots and boycotts. In the late 80s, sanctions were placed on South Africa, and the US no longer supported the apartheid government like it used to. Because of this, in 1990, black liberation parties were legalized again, and thus the apartheid was ended. And that's a very happy ending. That's crazy, bro.
It's kind of lit.
Okay.
Oh shit, Hayden died.
Oh shit, I died.
Oh shit.
Yo, dang, I wonder how the movement brought about real and lasting change. That's crazy.
It's not the script. Well, man, after the colored South African people fought so hard for their rights, but what did they actually change after 25 years? The popular activist Nelson Mandela made some of the most well-known changes in South Africa. What he had done was that he inspired thousands of people around the world to be catalysts for change. He set up foundations such as the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which helped express what they felt needed change with more ease. Also, he brought the word Ubuntu from ancient African culture, which meant togetherness. Nice. Okay, cut. He also brought the word Ubuntu from ancient African culture, which meant togetherness, which inspired people all around the world to be more tolerant towards each other and other culture.
So, what changes really came to Africa during this time?
Well, let me tell you, big boy.
Oh,
Well, let me tell you, big boy. Life changed drastically after the end of the apartheid. For example, the amount of houses who had access to electricity increased by 31% in just 10 years. Due to the government during apartheid segregation, the white from the black were left with worse living conditions. Not only did the apartheid help to segregate the people, but also decrease the amount of crime. The murder rate more than halved since 1994.
That's crazy, bro.
Whoa! First of all, South Africa is more economically unequal than ever before. First of all, South Africa is more economically unequal than ever between two races. This may be due to the impact of apartheid still has over the population. The average annual pay for a white person is $34,000 and for a black person it's $5,700 annually. This is a big difference always. Additionally, corruption in South Africa has gotten a lot worse since 1994, and it's one of the most corrupted countries in the world currently. Money is such a problem also due to the high unemployment rates, with 20% of the population who do not have work. Even though by living conditions improved after apartheid for black people, the architecture made by the past government still exists today. One might think after apartheid ended that the protests must have stopped, but this is not true either. Protests are still ongoing due to the poor communities lacking vital resources.
Wow, it sounds like they shouldn't have ended apartheid with all these bad changes. Ooh.
Whoa. Although some of the statistics may look negative, let me assure you that it would be a whole lot worse if racist apartheid government was still in power. The people of the country are still fighting hard for equality and welfare for everyone. It just takes time for everything good.
That's CKF, bro.
But what else was
happened?
happening around? Please continue. Can we see similar movements operating at the same time in other countries around the world?
The apartheid occurred during the time periods of 1948 until the year 1990. Between those times, bus boycotts were held were very similar to Rosa Parks bus boycotts in Alabama. In addition, protests like the Birmingham campaign were also held. Many colored people protested and fought for equality in public spaces. And during the year 1954, the Supreme Court outlawed segregated public spaces for black and white, as it was considered unconstitutional. Ultimately, the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts ended segregation in the US in 1965.
Dankjewel voor het kijken. Tot volgende keer.